There is a quiet confession many believers carry but rarely say out loud. I don't like having visitors. I feel it's important to say this gently, because this feeling does not automatically make you cold, unloving, or distant from God. Sometimes it simply means your soul has learned to breathe best in stillness. The Bible never mocks the quiet heart. In fact, Scripture often treats silence as a sacred space where God does his deepest work. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. Stillness is not emptiness. It is awareness. It is the place where the noise of expectation fades and the soul remembers who it belongs to. There are seasons when opening the door to people feels heavier than closing it, and that weight usually comes from somewhere real. I know what it's like to protect your space, because your spirit feels thin, stretched, or tired in ways words can't explain. The Bible acknowledges this kind of inward guarding without condemnation. Jesus himself often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Luke 5:16. He loved people deeply, yet he did not give unlimited access to his time or inner world. This tells us something important. Needing space is not rejection. Sometimes it is restoration. A guarded door does not always mean a hardened heart. Scripture also reminds us that God looks beneath behavior to intention. The Lord looks at the heart. 4 Samuel 16:7. Discomfort with visitors may reveal a soul longing for peace, safety, or healing rather than attention. The Bible never commands constant availability. It calls for love rooted in truth. Love begins inside, where God meets us honestly, without pretense. Before God asks us to open our homes, he first invites us to open our hearts to him, slowly, patiently, without force. Number 1. When silence feels safer than small talk. There are moments when conversation feels like noise instead of connection, and the soul quietly chooses silence because it feels safer. This is not always pride, and it is not always rejection. In Scripture, silence often appears as a response to inner weight, times when words feel insufficient or even harmful. The Bible never portrays constant talking as spiritual maturity. In fact, it often links wisdom with restraint. Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. Proverbs 17:28. Silence can be a form of discernment, a way the soul protects itself from saying what it does not yet understand. For some believers, avoiding visitors is not about disliking people, but about avoiding superficial exchange when the heart longs for depth. Small talk can feel draining when the inner life is tender or unsettled. Scripture recognizes this inner tension. Ecclesiastes reminds us, there is a time to be silent and a time to speak. Ecclesiastes 3:7. Not every season is meant for open doors and long conversations. Some seasons are meant for listening. Listening to God, to the soul, to what is quietly forming beneath the surface. The Bible also warns against forcing speech when the heart is not aligned. Words spoken too quickly can wound both the speaker and the listener. When silence feels safer, it may be because the soul is guarding something sacred. This is not fear by default, it can be reverence. God often speaks in quietness, not chaos. Elijah did not encounter God in the wind, the earthquake, or the fire, but in a gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19:12. A soul that prefers silence may be more attuned to this whisper than it realizes. Choosing silence over small talk can be an unconscious confession. I don't want to pretend. Scripture never praises pretending. God desires truth in the inward being. Psalm 51:6. When visitors bring expectations, performance, or shallow interaction, the soul may withdraw not to avoid love, but to preserve honesty. Silence, in this sense, is not emptiness. It is a pause where truth is protected until it can be shared without distortion. Number 2. The difference between solitude and isolation. The Bible makes a clear distinction between solitude that restores and isolation that slowly harms. Solitude is chosen with purpose. Isolation often grows from fear or despair. When someone says they don't like having visitors, Scripture invites us to look deeper, not to label the behavior, but to discern the condition of the heart. Jesus himself embraced solitude regularly, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Luke 5:16. His withdrawal was not avoidance of people, but alignment with the Father. Solitude in biblical terms is where strength is renewed. Isolation, however, carries a different weight. Proverbs warns, "Whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment." Proverbs 18:1. This kind of isolation is not peaceful. It is defensive. It cuts the soul off from correction, encouragement, and shared burdens. The difference is not found in how many visitors you have, but in whether your quiet leads you closer to God or further inward toward self-protection alone. Healthy solitude creates space for God to search the heart. "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts." Psalm 139:23. Isolation resists this searching because it fears exposure. Solitude invites God in. Isolation keeps everyone out, including him. The Bible never condemns being alone, but it consistently warns against being unreachable. God designed the human soul to need both communion with him and connection with others, in the right order and timing. If you avoid visitors because your soul feels clearer, calmer, and more prayerful and quiet, Scripture does not accuse you. But if the absence of people feeds bitterness, suspicion, or spiritual numbness, the Bible gently calls that soul back toward light. Solitude should soften the heart, not seal it. When chosen rightly, quiet does not shrink love. It purifies it, so that when the door does open again, it opens with wisdom, not exhaustion. Number 3. A wounded heart often protects its door. Sometimes the reason visitors feel unwelcome has little to do with personality and everything to do with pain. The Bible never ignores the reality of wounded hearts. Scripture understands that hurt changes how people relate, how they trust, and how open they feel. When the soul has been disappointed, misunderstood, or taken advantage of, it often responds by creating distance. Not out of bitterness, but out of survival. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. Notice that healing comes after acknowledging the wound, not denying it. A wounded heart tends to guard its space because space feels safer than exposure. Visitors can unknowingly stir memories, reopen questions, or place emotional demands the soul is not ready to carry. The Bible does not shame this instinct. Even David, a man after God's own heart, cried out from places of emotional exhaustion and retreat, "I am worn out from my groaning. All night long I flood my bed with weeping." Psalm 6. Scripture records these moments not to criticize weakness, but to show that God draws near to those who are overwhelmed, not socially impressive. Protecting your door can sometimes be an unconscious prayer. "Lord, I need time to heal." The danger is not in the protection itself, but in forgetting to bring the wound to God. When hurt is hidden from Him, it hardens. When it is placed before Him, it softens. The Bible encourages believers to be wise about exposure. Jesus did not entrust Himself to everyone, for He knew all people. John 2:24. Love does not require unlimited access. Wisdom allows boundaries while healing takes place. A soul that avoids visitors because it is healing is not rejecting love. It is asking for restoration. God does not rush wounded hearts. He does not knock loudly or demand openness before trust is rebuilt. He works gently, patiently, often in quiet seasons, and when healing deepens, openness begins to return, not forced but free. Number 4. When your home becomes a sanctuary, not a fortress. The Bible speaks often about hospitality, but it never presents it as obligation without discernment. Hospitality in Scripture flows from love, not pressure. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. 1 Peter 4:9. That final phrase matters. When hospitality is forced, it loses its spiritual meaning. A home that feels like a sanctuary is one where peace, prayer, and presence with God are protected, not sacrificed to appearances. There is a difference between a sanctuary and a fortress. A sanctuary is open to God and selectively open to others. A fortress is closed to everyone, including God. Scripture never asks believers to turn their homes into places of exhaustion. Martha welcomed Jesus, but her anxious hosting distracted her from his presence. Jesus gently corrected her, saying, "You are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one." Luke 10:41-42. The problem was not hospitality, it was losing peace in the process. When your home becomes a place where your soul can rest, pray, and breathe, Scripture honors that. God often chooses quiet places to meet his people. Forced social openness can slowly erode that sacred atmosphere. The Bible values order, peace, and intentional living. God is not a God of disorder, but of peace. 1 Corinthians 14:3-3. A home shaped by peace reflects his character more than a home constantly filled with noise. The danger comes when protection turns into fear. A sanctuary invites God's presence daily. A fortress resists all intrusion, even divine conviction. The Bible calls believers to examine not how often their door opens, but why it stays closed. If the home protects prayer, healing, and obedience, it is aligned with Scripture. If it protects pride, resentment, or avoidance of truth, God gently invites transformation. A sanctuary prepares the heart for love. A fortress avoids it. Number 5. God often meets his servants in quiet places. Throughout Scripture, God repeatedly draws his servants away from crowds before sending them back with clarity and strength. Quiet places are not escapes from responsibility. They are preparation for obedience. Moses encountered God not among people, but alone on the mountain. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Exodus 33:11. That intimacy was formed in separation before it shaped leadership among the people. God often chooses quiet because noise competes with surrender. When someone feels uneasy about visitors, it may reflect a soul that senses how easily spiritual focus can be diluted. Jesus himself modeled this rhythm. Before major moments of teaching, healing, or sacrifice, he withdrew. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place, where he prayed. Mark 1:35. Notice that he left a house. He stepped away from people, not because he loved them less, but because communion with the Father came first. The Bible never portrays solitude as spiritual weakness. Instead, it often precedes transformation. Elijah collapsed emotionally after public victory and was led into silence, rest, and gentle correction. Jonah withdrew in bitterness, yet God still met him there. Quiet exposes what noise can hide. In silence, motives surface, wounds speak, and God addresses what applause and conversation often distract from. For some believers, visitors disrupt this inward attentiveness. The soul senses that too much interaction pulls it outward when God is calling it inward. Scripture affirms that calling. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Lamentations 3:26. Quiet waiting is not passive, it is deeply active faith. God forms depth in hidden places long before fruit appears in visible ones. However, Scripture also shows that quiet seasons are not permanent residences. They are sacred intervals. God meets His servants in solitude so that when the time comes to engage again, they do so with humility, clarity, and love, not depletion. Avoiding visitors may be a sign that God is shaping something inward before it is shared outward. Number 6. Fear of visitors versus discernment of the Spirit. The Bible carefully distinguishes between fear and discernment, even though they can look similar on the surface. Both may result in closed doors, but they come from opposite places within the soul. Fear contracts the heart. Discernment steadies it. Scripture is clear. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7. When avoidance is driven by anxiety, suspicion, or constant unease, it signals a heart under pressure, not peace. Discernment, on the other hand, operates from clarity and calm. It is the ability to recognize what nourishes the soul and what drains it. Jesus demonstrated discernment constantly. He did not heal everyone who demanded it, nor did he explain himself to every critic. He knew when to engage and when to withdraw. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. Matthew 7:6. This was not contempt, it was wisdom. Access was guided by purpose, not pressure. If visitors feel unwelcome because the soul senses disorder, manipulation, or distraction from God's direction, Scripture supports restraint. Discernment protects what God is growing. Fear, however, isolates without peace. It closes the door and leaves the heart restless, defensive, and inwardly tense. Discernment closes the door and leaves the heart quiet, prayerful, and anchored. The Bible invites believers to test their motives honestly. Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. Lamentations 3:40. The question is not whether the door is closed, but whether the heart behind it is at rest. Peace is the marker of God's guidance. Fear demands control. Discernment produces trust. When avoidance of visitors is guided by discernment, it does not sever love, it preserves it. It ensures that when the door does open, it opens from fullness, not obligation. Scripture does not demand constant availability. It calls for faithful obedience, shaped by wisdom, peace, and truth. Number 7. Opening your heart before opening your door. The Bible consistently places greater weight on the condition of the heart than on outward behavior. God is not primarily measuring how often your door opens, but whether love, humility, and obedience are alive within you. Scripture says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Proverbs 4:23. A guarded heart is not the same as a hardened heart. Guarding is wisdom. Hardening is resistance. The difference lies in whether the heart remains responsive to God. Some believers feel pressure to appear open, social, or constantly welcoming, even when their inner life feels fragile. But the Bible never instructs us to perform openness. It calls us to cultivate love from the inside out. Jesus confronted the Pharisees not because they lacked activity, but because their hearts were closed, while their actions appeared righteous. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Matthew 15:8. God would rather have a quiet home with an open heart than a busy home where love has grown thin. Opening the heart means allowing God to search motives honestly. Is the closed door protecting prayer, healing, and peace? Or is it protecting pride, unresolved anger, or fear of being seen? Scripture invites this examination gently, not harshly. Search me, God, and know my heart. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Psalm 139:23-24. This prayer matters more than any social expectation. When the heart is open to God, doors will open or close in the right seasons, without guilt or strain. Love does not require constant access. It requires sincerity. The Bible never equates holiness with availability. It equates holiness with faithfulness, and faithfulness begins inwardly, where God shapes desire, restores trust, and teaches the soul when to welcome and when to rest. Conclusion: when God knocks gently, not loudly. God is not standing outside your door with accusations. He is not counting visitors or measuring social warmth. Scripture reveals a God who approaches gently, who understands the language of weary souls. Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. Revelation 3:20. He does not break in. He waits. His knock is not loud pressure, it is patient invitation. If you don't like having visitors, the Bible does not rush to label you. It asks deeper questions about peace, healing, wisdom, and love. God knows when a soul needs quiet more than conversation. He knows when solitude is restoring and when it is slowly closing in. And He is faithful to guide you through both, without shame. The goal is not a permanently closed door or a constantly open one. The goal is a heart so aligned with God that it knows when to welcome and when to wait. When God leads, neither solitude nor hospitality becomes a burden. Both become acts of obedience. In the end, God is not asking for access to your home first. He asks for access to your heart. When that door opens to Him, every other door will open or remain closed exactly as it should, in peace, wisdom, and love.